My name is Zoe Cinel, and I'm the curator at the Rochester Art Center. And today I'm joined by artists Shirin and Clement Valla, whose work is featured in A Lapse into the Ephemeral. The show is up at the Rochester Art Center from until July 16th, and we're open Wednesday to Sunday, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. So I hope you can come and see in person if you are in Minnesota. Let's start with introducing our guests. Clement Valla is a New York-based artist whose work considers how humans and computers are increasingly entangled in making, seeing, and reading pictures. He had a recent solo exhibition at PC Galleries in Providence, XPO Gallery in Paris, and Transfer Gallery in Brooklyn. His work has been exhibited also in various museums and galleries in Germany, Netherlands, Latvia, and various cities in the US. His work has been cited in The Guardian, The Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, Huffington Post, Rhizome, Domus, Wired, and BBC and various other publications. What you see here is installation shot of his work, postcard from Google Earth that is part of the show. He received a BA in architecture from Columbia University and an MFA from the Rhode Island School of Design in digital and media. And he's currently an associate professor at the Rhode Island School of Design. Thank you for joining us today. Shirin Anlen is a creative technologist, researcher and artist based in New York. Her work explores societal implication of emerging technology with a focus on internet platforms and artificial intelligence. She's the media technologist at Witness Technology Tree and Opportunities Program, where she investigates the impact of deepfakes, media manipulation, media forensics, content authenticity, and cryptography practices in the space of human rights violation. Here you see some screenshots, and there will be an installation shot of her work, Tina Symphony on Longin. She has exhibited in various museums and galleries in New York, Tel Aviv, Frankfurt, and Basel. She presented project at SIGGRAPH, Festival de Cannes, IDFA.lab, and on the Next Web, Google Web Experiment and Vice. She also received awards from the Biennial of Media Arts of Chile, the Knight Foundation, and many others. And she created the VR program of Doc Aviv Festival in years 2016 to 19. It co-founded the first VR and interactive storytelling festival and lab in Israel. She's a member of Women Plus Art AI Collective and Rehearse Center. And she holds an MFA in television and cinema from the Tel Aviv University. And she's a research fellow at the MIT Open Documentary Lab. Thank you for being here too. Before I ask a few questions to the artist, I'm just going to give a little context for the exhibition. Lapse into the Ephemeral is a group show that showcases storytelling and new media in artworks and artworks from artistic collective and artists working internationally with 3D scanning technologies to preserve the ephemeral. Other participating artists include Benjamin Bush and Sadia Sharmi, Forma Fantasma, and Advit. And the idea for this show is that ephemerality is an important concept for us. It's kind of bound to our participation in the natural cycle of life, and philosophers and artists across geography and history have explored deeply this idea, and their discovery influenced languages and cultures. So today, thanks to digital technology, we have access to a potentially infinite and everlasting archive, but also we live in those uncertain times where unexpected environmental factors, growing social tension, and world epidemics can just abruptly change the life of individuals and community. And so some of the questions that the exhibition asks is, how do we define the ephemeral today? How do we build an archive, and what is actually worth preserving? So the artists were invited already reflect on some of those themes in various ways, and they really think about what is the role and the media of preservation today. They all work with advanced digital 3D scanning techniques, and they push the boundaries And they push the boundaries of what this technology can do beyond their standard commercial uses. So they pioneer new ways of using them, and what comes out are very unique, innovative aesthetics that kind of create meaningful relationship between the media and the subject. And now I'm going to open up to the artist and ask both of you, Shirin and Clement. So, what is the role of preservation today and its media for you? And how does an archive survive time and technology, in your opinion? And if Shirin want to start.
Thanks, Zoe. Thanks for having me, and thanks for hosting Tina in this wonderful exhibition. It's such a great question. I think also the exhibition is deals with such a really important theme, the timeless, or like the momentary of like our time, and in relation to archive and technology. And I think like at least in Tina, like there is something about the entire archive is like as a concept is like capturing a moment, right? A moment in history, and telling that it's not about creating it as a permanent, like a storyline. It's a moment that we want to refer to. And also in Sina, it's kind of the same. It's like capturing those people and their moment in time, what they felt and why they spend their time in that place. But also it's captured the moment of the technology itself and the way it was able to preserve and kind of like reconstruct the environment in 3D in the web. And there is something about in Sina that we really celebrated the aesthetic of the glitch, because we really felt it's kind of like creating this, highlighting this temporary moment in time of what the technology could achieve on the web, the 3D on the web. And there is also the aspect of the glitch itself that highlights the moment of time of the system and the technology you're using. So there's something about that I felt is kind of going hand in hand. And I think it's related to where we are today. Preservation today is using what we are able to do today. And there it's a question that a lot of people are dealing with, the Internet Archive, for example, like how we can preserve and record our digital life, and how we can preserve and record like physical elements, and how we can access them as the technology is progressing. Yeah, I think that's my main comment. I don't know if it's like answering the question, but kind of like maybe proposing a few thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think you brought up so many interesting idea also. Yeah, what is an archive if we don't have access to the internet, right? Like where's all the
Or
memories go, right? Like what
or
happened?
even like access to the internet, yes, absolutely, but even the files themselves, right? The way we are like can access like even Sina, it's a web VR, and I'm not sure it's even working anymore on the VR, because you need to keep update, and it was using experimental like plugins of Chrome in that time. And so there is something about using technology in order to preserve an element, that you need to keep update the technology itself and your work as it keep going. And then even if you have access to the internet or other types of like materials or files, it can get like outdated pretty fast. And then what is the right elements to continue and preserve it? Is it like a screen recording? Is it like printing stuff? And that's also temporary in many ways.
Right. I mean, it was one of the challenges with exhibiting the work at the art center, and then we opted to have an installation like with different monitors, multi-channel, right? Because yeah, it's also a little maybe. I remember your platform works on the Vive, right?
Yeah.
And it's at this point it's a little hard to find the Vive around, right? So yeah, I'm thinking about this idea of technology that updates itself somehow, and things get, erased and updated. Like, I would like to open up the same question to Clement.
Hi everyone. Hi Zoe. Thanks for inviting me. I don't know. I mean, it's a big question. A lot of pieces in there. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much my work directly deals with archives, but at any rate, one of the things I like to think of, at least, or maybe in that work, was like the difference between a picture and a JPEG. I don't know. I feel like in traditional media, we had archives of documents, and the information is kind of contained on the surface of the document, and you can point to the document and always go back there. And then the minute you move to the digital, what's really funny is that a JPEG doesn't actually contain image data, right? It contains numbers that a computer has to perform into image data. So I take analogies from music. I think everything, when we're working with the digital, we're working with scores, right? And so we're actually documenting performances, software performances, right? They're not sort of like human-made performances, but every time you open a file, a software is kind of enacting it, and it might do it differently in different times. So I don't know. I think that's partially what I was after in my project, and I think it's a little silly because I'm documenting one kind of digital system with another kind of digital system, and then calling it a postcard. And I'm playing around with that. I mean, I have at different moments, like in the show, they are sort of physical postcards. So it's you take a screenshot of some kind of digital performance, and then you have this other kind of digital file that maybe lasts a little longer, and then you print it out as a postcard, which has its own kind of ephemerality. I mean, it's not, we're not talking archival printing and stuff here. And I mean, ideally, people are mailing the postcards out, so not even keeping them, and they're entering kind of different sort of networks. So, yeah, I just think a lot of these things have sort of different times and different periods and perform slightly differently. And I thought it would just be fun to kind of play around with that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the physicality of your work, I think it's something that, I mean, I imagine that it's been very, very popular. People like love the postcards. They take them in bunches, and so I hope they go somewhere, right? It's like thinking about how maybe that artifact can like definitely last longer than the actual data that made it, right? And who knows where it goes and what kind of, I don't know, it's interesting to think that maybe eventually we'll go back to Earth, maybe because it's semi-recyclable, right? So there's something about, yeah, something that not really exists in the physical world and going back to, I don't know, the physical world, right? Yeah, I guess I move to my next question that's kind of connected to this, but that's a slightly different angle. So I mean, the artwork presented in this exhibition or archive or deal with objects, spaces, and experiences that can be associated with counterculture, social engagement, and to a certain extent, sort of subversive thinking. They prioritize narrative point of view that are commonly overlooked or marginalized. For what concerns Sina, this work archives fragments of a space and time that no longer exist, and also encounters which are ephemeral by nature, with people who seem to be most invisible to society. And for postcards from Google Earth, the piece is kind of narrated, I would say, through a viewpoint of a digital tourist. I think you mentioned that in your article, in your essay, right? Who exercises sort of counter surveillance on what are the mistakes, I will call them, of Google Maps, Google Earth. And so the software itself makes like geography virtually kind of accessible to everybody, but also like kills the joy of traveling, right? In a way, like discovery and such. I was just wondering what drives for both of you this interest in these like hidden narratives of like invisible, and why they're worth preserving, in your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, part of my interest has to do with the relationship between the automated or the machinic and the human. And with a vast system like Google Earth, once the system has been put in place, it's perfectly possible that some images on Google Earth, and I just call them images, which maybe I shouldn't have, some data on Google Earth will never have been seen by a human. I don't know, as an artist, you start to wonder, well, what is a picture? Picture in the past has implied human to human communication, has implied authorial intent, maybe, so then you wonder, okay, if something, some configuration of pixels or some configuration of data has never been seen by a human, what is it? What are we talking about? So that was kind of one aspect of it that I think interested me. The other aspect of it that interested me is what happens when sort of things created by an algorithmic system, once they are viewed by a human, actually have a kind of visceral or emotional or intellectual effect on that human, and possibly an unintended one. And so I think that's a lot of why I gravitated towards these pictures. Is there, for me at any rate, they were just surprising, and they were a little bit, you get like a little bit of a tingle in your gut thinking of like, ooh, what happens if I fall down that road or follow that road? So there's a kind of just an embodied reaction to them. And I've gotten, people have said they're funny or horrifying or any of these things. So I'm also really interested in these moments where the algorithmic elicits human embodied responses, whether intended or unintended. And I just think those moments are kind of worth preserving. So I guess in your kind of setup, the thing I'm, I guess, most interested in is an embodied human response to an algorithmic system kind of doing its thing.
Well, and I think that you've presented this project in different forms, iteration, right? But for the way it's set up at the art center, we have a large, maybe I'll share a picture later, a large vinyl of like a dam, right? It's a dam seen from above, like a bird view, and it's all melted and stuff. So it kind of when when there was like selecting the picture and like going through that process, I was really thinking among the one that you were interested in maybe exhibiting, I was like, well, this one really makes me think about those sort of illusions, the sort of like moments where there's street artists where they draw those like illusions that really make people feel they're falling or something. And then it made me also think about like how some people feel when they wear like a VR goggle, right? That can be very disorienting for the body. Yeah, I'm very interested in like how you think about the embodied response to something that is just pure data, right?
Yeah. I think it's exactly that. Like with the show, just thinking about, once we kind of decided it was going to be on the floor. I mean, we played around with sort of different configurations, right? We were going back and forth based on the space. Yeah, it just becomes a sort of heightening maybe, or just emphasizing what the kind of algorithm is already doing. In this case, it was like I've displayed them on the floor a number of times, and that always seems to emphasize the kind of God's eye view, or the drone's eye view, or that position of sort of power and control that we're actually now really used to, but that previous centuries would have been called the bird's eye view or the God's eye view. So it was just a matter of heightening that sort of sensation, and making a picture that kind of functioned there. And yeah, again, just sort of like had a sort of heightened effect on the viewer, at least I hope.
Yeah, I finally found the image that I was looking for in our Infinite Drive, just to be on theme. So I'm just gonna share it for people's reference. I also, it's also interesting how like it pushes the viewer to like walk through it. So there's that, because then you want to reach those postcards that are really, really exciting for people. It's interesting how this is like a point of view that it's not human, right? It's not for people. It's the machine or something else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I was really happy with how the installation came together, because I think it's kind of fun that the postcards make the viewer walk. Walk into the image. I think is a funny way, but then it's all just sort of done in physical space with analog means.
Right. There is something that it just remind me of a piece of a VR experience piece or whatever, that maybe it was my first VR or something like that. I don't know. It was called the plank. So you walk on a plank on top of a CD, and you are physically walking on a piece of wood that it's like 1 inch tall. So really you don't fall, you can't hurt yourself. But I remember even being somebody who's like extremely aware of like, oh, maybe this is gonna feel like something, But I go into the experience being like controlling my body. And really, the feeling of like in the VR falling down affected my body. And when I stepped down that 1 inch, I was like, oh, it kind of makes me think about that too. So it's, again, interesting, the inspiration back and forth between the physical and the digital. I'm going to pass the ball and move the question to Shirin.
Yeah, I like your reference now. It's kind of like the image that you showed is like a leap of faith of like, I'm reaching above it to get to the postcard. So yeah, I see where the reference came from. The question was like, what drove me to that narrative, Dick, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah,
why why it's worth preserving those narratives that are like overlooked and stuff.
So I came from a completely different like starting point from Clement. Like my story started really from a personal point of view. I grew up building above the square, and after I got divorced a year or two before I started the project, I came back to an apartment across my grandma that still lived in the same building. So it started like as a healing experience for me to come back to myself. And I spent a lot of time in the square. And one of the things that I started to notice when I did so is that there is a routine to the space. It's a physical space that has this kind of like, it's like a clock type of like routines. In 10 a.m. this person comes and sit on this bench, and in 12 this person comes in at the other bench, and it's like, and then it's the same benches every day that they sit, and it's the same time every day that they come. And there's something so comforting about that experience, or that kind of like knowing the routine of the space, that allowed me kind of like let go. And I started to talk to the people and most of the characters, like when we in Cena, when we call them, like, how did you rephrase it? I think you said like a counter culture, right? So I think like in Cena, what it's like, this counterculture people are mostly elders and homeless people that just like sat in the square most of the day. Once we started to like really became friends more or less, and like really develop personal communication, I was really surprised how most of them, and maybe it was the place I was in my life at that time, but like I was really surprised how the thread of like lost love and regrets of people they lost or things that they didn't do was like the common thread between all of our conversation. And I was surprised because like I didn't expect a 75, 81 years old man talking about his lost love from like 25 years ago. But I also didn't expect that from a homeless person that I used to sit and he creating like this plastic bottle all day. So there was something that was so charming to get to know, to have a different types of perspective of the place. And I think so what drove me at that point was like thinking about the relationships and how we connect to each other through the space. And that was the story of Tina. For me at the end, it was like how we can have a new perspective on something that feels so familiar, and we are just crossing every day, but there is so much magic in the mundane things and really small stories that exist around us. And I think the use of the technology of like deciding to scan it and creating a VR experience that you can walk and like approach the character and activate them like that was a way for me to explore how we embody this curiosity, how we creating that type of new relationship with this space. I think that's like kind of like what drove the technology and what drove the story itself.
Yeah, it makes me also think about like what you just said about how a physical space can be that routine place and place for encounters, or just to spend time outside of the house, or if you don't have a house, that's where you stay, right? Or maybe a certain demographic or certain people, and then how internet like web platforms can be a similar space for others, right, like me. And so I found also interesting that you collected these experiences in a web VR platform, right, that allowed for some interaction with the characters, right, with that kind of maybe as embodied experience as it gets with the technology, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of decision also around how we design, how we direct the viewer in the VR space, and how we direct you to walk or to get closer. And there are a lot of like additional, we use like a live action 3D scanning to record the characters, but half of their body was empty, and we filled it with animation that came out of their body in order to kind of like entice you to look at them in different direction too, but also the way you can look at them, view them, like they're all glitchy, and it's all around that. Also the decision that what the tech we decided to use, but it's also we wanted you to get on your knees and sit on the floor with them, as that was the best perspective to, like, we designed it that it would be the best perspective to kind of view them. Yeah, I think there is a lot of like, we try to create this kind of like direction around the feeling and the emotion that we wanted you as a viewer to feel in the virtual space. And I think I was also curious how we can maybe bring that back to the physical space, and how it might change the way we are like kind of engaging with people, or shape our body experience in a way.
Did you have like were you inspired by like the physical, like your physical experience with the square and how you engage with people, or it was more like curate the experience as it best fits, you know?
What do you mean? Maybe say a little bit more.
When you were like creating the experience, right, to like how you engage with those characters or people on the VR platform, were you like thinking about your own embodied experience of like how you went and say hi to people, or was more like a general, it was like a specific memory? Or
yeah, it became a poem in that point. It became like the storyline of the day and the routine of like, it's like I said before, like this feeling of like it's a clock that moves and people move in the direction of the sun in order to like kind of like sit on the warmer benches. So it became this like, the way we position things had this like multi-layer understanding of the space. And we developed it in 2015-16. So the walking VR was very limited, so we did need to kind of like move people to you too. You could not walk the entire space. It still was connected to cable on your desktop. So there was a lot of like, we work with a technical limitation to design how we position the subject, but also like how it was connected to this overall idea of a day in the square.
well, I guess it's a nice connection to the next question for you. You were doing something quite experimental using these technologies outside that any like kind of lighting, uncontrollable, and all of that. And there's many different technologies used in your piece, right? Photogrammetry, and then volumetric filmmaking, 3D animation, and such, right? What are some of the challenges that you faced in making this work? I know you work with a crew, right? So how much this collaboration with others kind of informed the work at the end? How did they shape it?
They completely shaped it. I had an amazing team, and it was a really like a blessing to work together and like kind of brainstorms. Every time we encountered a lot of points that were like a breaking point. Oh, we cannot do it. We need to change. What we imagine is possible might not be. But I had such an amazing team that we kept pushing forward and find like really creative solution to accommodate all. What makes it like it's as a web VR, so it's all this 3D complex world, like what you said, photogrammetry, 3D modeling, 3D animation, and live shooting 3D all exist on the web. Was very, very heavy, and it's like 13 characters, each one has a dialogue, a monologue, so it's like it's a very heavy project, and we needed to kind of like accommodate a lot of things. But I will even take a step back, even the decision of how we didn't want to move the characters from this square. We wanted to document everything in the square, including everyone, like all the extras and all the subject. And for the live shooting, volumetric filmmaking, the live shooting 3D, we needed to really, it's a public space. We needed to connect a driver and a laptop and the camera and the scanner and electricity for all of that, with characters that are not really like, it's not something that feels comfortable, and it's something that kind of also break their routines, which is very fragile anyway. So it was a lot of challenges with like building this trust and comfortable with like bringing this setup, but also bringing the setup to a physical space that is elevated and not so accessible. So it was like that type of challenge, and then the challenge of like afterwards, how we are actually creating this world that will engage you and will be stimulating for you as a viewer. And there were a lot of like solutions that we found that are very technical, and I don't think it's so interesting to go into those kind of details. But I really enjoyed the experimental part of it, and I really wanted to, like I said in the beginning, like I really want this glitchy feeling to stay. I didn't want to refine it or make it prettier. I thought it's like capturing the moment of time of the project with the technology, but also the moment, this like the vulnerability of the story itself. So I really like that. That was the aesthetic, and then it was a lot of fun to like also work with like plugin and libraries that were developed in the same time, and kind of like assist a lot of things that were developed in the same time through this project. And we managed to do that as a team, which was really also satisfying outside of this project.
Well, I think it's interesting you reserved the camera eye. I mean, that's how, you know, technology sees things, right? And there is, for some reason, as humans, we do train technology to look at things the way we look at things, or something similar, right? Because we want, but it's different, right? It has a different setting, a function through like different rules. And so that was that glitchy aesthetic, I think, once explained, it makes a lot of sense why you like kept it the way it is. I do also like appreciate the element of, I mean, I think it shows the element of softness through the little animations and such. Yeah, there is I mean, is there softness in technology? That's, I think, another like big question, right? Like, so the moment that you say you bring the cameras in front of people who are already pretty maybe like vulnerable and feel it might shy them away, right? So how do you make technology look not scary or accessible too, which is maybe one of the challenges with the exhibition, with all the screens and such, right? But there's a part of storytelling in many of the projects, or accessibility like Clement's piece, that people can, you know, hold it, that like bridges that gap a little bit. Yeah, I'm gonna move forward to another question for Clement. It's a little different, and it's more, I mean, I really touched about like on this a little bit, but your work to me really brought up some ideas among a lot of like among other themes, but something about accessibility of the physical space versus the accessibility of a virtual space. Let's say maybe some people have access to internet and they can see things through Google Earth, and so they might not have access to the same physical space, right? Or vice versa, or both, right? But there's that kind of conversation. While like a drone can be anywhere, maybe, if it's Google owned. And then also ideas about how we perceive a space as, and that's what we were talking about just now, how we look at a space versus how a software looks at things, right? Which we know from your work that it's different. Sometimes highway melts. So if you have some more thoughts about some of those ideas that you want to share.
Yeah. Oof. Another big, yeah, that's another kind of big topic. Yeah, there were kind of two questions there. One was sort of access, and then the other was maybe the
The
gap.
perception. Yeah, the perception of like how a machine sees versus how we see it, right?
In terms of how a machine sees and how we see, I don't know, we start to get into, I mean, I don't know, I might just take like a big step back and say every technology shapes the way we see. If we're just talking about vision technologies, I mean, I would argue that every technology even changes the way we think. Plato is actually really good on this. Plato has some pretty great dialogues where Socrates is pretty against writing, because writing will destroy memory, and without memory, philosophical thought is not possible. So Socrates hated the technology of writing. And so clearly that's played out. None of us can think anymore because of writing. And so, I mean, it just kind of goes on from there. So then, yeah, in terms of technologies of seeing, I think, what do we get? Some of the things that I think about might be maybe more specifically about like, how do we make art with machines? Might be the kind of question that I ask myself, and that might be related to the access question. Maybe I'm not entirely sure, but so, okay, Google makes these tools for money or to serve us more advertisements. Can you make art with these tools, right? Can you make art with these tools that are actually completely built for a kind of other purpose? And I think that's where the question starts to get a little bit interesting and maybe a little bit tricky. I go to a German philosopher, Wilhelm Flusser, quite a bit here. In a nutshell, Wilhelm Flusser, you know, he's talking about photography, but I think about this a lot when I'm working with technology. Is he's saying, you know, the camera, for example, if you take a film camera, a film camera is a machine that already contains all possible photographs in it somehow, right? So it's an infinite number of photographs, but it's an infinite number of photographs within a bounded space. So if you're working with a 35 millimeter film camera, you're not going to be able to produce a photo negative that's 2 meters long. It's just not possible within the camera kind of system, right? So he kind of uses information theory to think about what it is that we do when we have automated picture making. So a camera defines an infinite number of photos within a bounded space. And what becomes interesting is what's happening within that bounded space. And so with a camera, for example, 99% of what a lot of people are going to do with that camera is, let's say, take family photos. So a very small portion of that whole space of what's possible with a camera is actually sort of being explored or being discovered. I mean, it still happens. Like, let's say we swap out the camera with like Instagram. There's all these great accounts. There's an Instagram account called like Instagram or something, which is just like sets of Instagram photos where every single photo is identical. I mean, it's all different people, but they all pose the same way or remake the same photo. So in a funny way, you've got this kind of interesting search space that's sort of being repeated over and over and over again. And so perhaps what might be really interesting for an artist to do with a kind of seeing machine is to go to the least expected areas of that bounded space. What are the least probable images that a human could make with a given tool or with a given apparatus? So I think it's that it's sort of like weird to even think of pictures or art in terms of probability, but somehow it kind of works in this interesting way, at least for me. So again, when I'm making these pictures, I'm like, what is the most likely picture produced by a particular apparatus? Like, it's almost like, what is the machine or the programmers who made the machine or the programming machine conjoint system, what does it want? Though I'm loath to use that word, but it's like, what are the images that are most likely to come out of that whole system? And then what are very unlikely images to come out of that system? And maybe it's worth sort of looking at those spaces. And then there's also, I don't know, with the glitch aesthetic too, which again, I know wasn't really the question, but there's a certain amount of, the glitch kind of makes the tool itself become sort of more obvious. Most of these pieces of software or apparatuses that they're using, I'd say, I could be wrong, but it seems like the makers are aiming for as much transparency as possible, right? They don't want you to think about how the image is made. They just want you to kind of consume the image. So they're going for kind of ease and seamlessness. And I think the minute you kind of get rough edges or you kind of get moments that break the illusion of seamlessness, those are moments where all of a sudden you start to think about the machine itself, the computer, the camera, whatever, Google Earth, and what it's actually doing. And so I think that's what's interesting there. So in some ways, I'm a lot less interested in like what a human sees and what a computer sees. I'm much more interested in that sort of dance back and forth between the human and computer. And I don't think either visual system is extractable or independent, but it's sort of like, what is that moment when it's the machinic vision that's more dominant, and what is that moment where the human vision becomes kind of more dominant, and it's maybe the back and forth between the two. I guess that's I think that's how I would think about it.
I think it can go to that question of like, now there's all these AI things going on, right? It's like, is the AI independent or it's not, right? Like, it's the machine independent from like us because we make it somehow, but at a certain point it becomes its own thing because it processes an amount of data that we're not able to process, right? So it's something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is kind of a case in point, especially because AI is built on probability, right? AI, in most AI models, especially the language ones, are built to, Chat GPT, for example, is just built to predict what the next word is given the words that have come before. So with these machines, you know, with these systems in particular, I mean, let's not call them machines, but with these sort of software systems in particular, yeah, you're just going to get this huge increase in probabilistic output. So the search space is gonna actually, I mean, you can see it with Midjourney or even with Chat GPT. They're really good at things where you can already kind of predict what's going to come out before it even goes in. I would say on the one hand. I would say on the other hand, with these systems, you know, I mean, I have no worries about AI, but the idea that art production gets automated as somehow maybe frightening or scary, or what's actually going on is like that Instagram example that I was already given. I already think most art or content production to a degree is already automated or sort of selected for by particular filters. So in the case of Instagram, I mean, I don't know, I'm not on Instagram enough. Let's call it like the Instagram market already sort of kind of predetermines the mass majority of outputs, or at least the things that get past the algorithm, right? So with AI, we're taking kind of behaviors that are already so defined by algorithms and then just pushing that a little more. So I kind of think that artists who are having fun with this stuff will figure out ways to change it or to play with it or to find that like least probable output from the system, and to throw that up for consideration, which I think will be interesting. I don't know, we'll see. I mean, I do think there's a you know, what's called a phase change. Like if something like scale change is big enough, then emergent properties that are unexpected might come out. And so by definition, those are unforeseeable, and that might actually be really interesting. But I don't at all believe in the narrative of sort of AI replacing artists or anything like that. You know, and then the third point I would make, I'm sorry, I know I'm going off the rails here, but the only third point I would make about AI is that, you know, when Photoshop was invented, it unfortunately put a lot of photo editors out of business, right? So I think tied up in all our discussions about all this stuff, machinic images, computer vision, et cetera, is an underlying labor issue that maybe gets confused a little bit with the art issue. Can AI make art? Definitely. Will AI put people out of business? Definitely. Should we talk about labor in this country and how labor is treated? Probably. Should we have that conversation with the mystification of art? Probably not. Those are the things where it's like, it's also really good to kind of maybe untangle those issues and not mystify art and say, yeah, AI is going to make stuff, probably likely stuff. AI is going to create labor problems. But in the long run, also, I'm actually more optimistic than not, because Photoshop, what does Photoshop do? It actually enables a visual language to develop to the point where like now, as I think in this current society, there's a million jobs around image manipulation and image making, much more so than there were pre-Photoshop, because with the ease of Photoshop becomes a whole language that actually produces a whole kind of new labor market. I don't know. I think those are issues that we haven't really touched on here, but that I definitely think about when I'm thinking about, you know, what are machines making images, or machines making, again, I don't love calling them images, and machines producing data that humans can interpret as images, and what that does to art and to labor. And I think interesting things are going to happen, but I'm definitely not a doomsayer. I guess I'm more optimistic than not. Though by that same token, I think the majority of what we're going to see are going to be really boring images because it's a probabilistic model. But I think that's already the case.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are going to be some artists that really try to master what is behind the technology, right? The words, the database, like how you actually create an image using that can be applied. I think old technologies, like, yeah, maybe that's the pushing the boundary, but also like having an understanding. I think I want to hear from Shirin. Maybe I think you kind of mentioned that comment, like your fascination or interest in like technology, but maybe if Shirin, you wanna like share that with us. I don't know where it comes from, what it is now, and yeah, why you decide to use this media. They're definitely not the easiest, but I mean, I guess nothing is easy, but they're definitely experimental in nature, right?
You mean the media that I used in Sina?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not bound to any technology itself. When I'm using a specific technology, it's because I feel it's like serve the story or connect to the feeling that I want to kind of talk about. So in Siena itself, I think, like I mentioned before, it was a lot about, yeah, the space was about to be demolished. I want to preserve it. So there was a lot of logic for like 3D scanning the texture and then to kind of like rebuild it. It was like also about like how we are bringing people closer, and that was like the volumetric filmmaker came in, and how we're using the animation to give like visuals to the emotions that comes, or the poems that I feel are being told. So like when I said I'm fascinated by technology, I feel like it's kind of like going on the same line that Clement kind of talked. It's like depends on like there is like the way we see is the way we are being shaped by technology, but also the way we are developing and using technologies by the way we are shaping the technology itself too. So there is this dance and duality that makes me really be fascinated about it. But I'm also like I'm really curious, and I'm thinking a lot about the how it's affecting us, the relationship between us. So that was a question that was in Siena, how, but also today how it's affecting all what we just you two discussed about the implication of AI, but also how it's affecting in different types of regions in a global sense, in a different types of cultures. So I'm thinking a lot about those kind of questions too.
Yeah, maybe in a way, like it also connects to like accessibility, right? Because we talked a little bit about you talked a little bit about it, like as databases and technology update itself, then it might become less accessible. It might just not be like saved and stuff. Just the way, you know, we have Plato got to us, and a lot of other philosophers were chopped by the, you know, medieval church amanuensis, right? So like we don't have that knowledge. It's a same history in a way. But then also, I don't know, maybe there's something cultural about how we approach technology, and there's definitely something about like resources and social class maybe, and geography, or like that kind of, you know, access that we do have here, but some other places might not be that, just not be that easy, right? In a way.
Oh, there's also a question above me. I can just shoot for it.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the artist talk. That was great. I came in a little late, so I don't really know what happened in the first 20 minutes. I have also not seen the exhibition because I'm in San Diego. I was looking at Shirin's work, and I love the dinner tables they're using. And it's doing a lot of work for me, myself, as sites of, I think, relationality, family, digesting, consuming. And this is a question that I myself am curious. It's like, what is the line between digestion and consumption? Because I think it's a super hard question for me. In a way, the audience is sitting in some of the dinner tables. They're sitting with and also digesting the projections on the plates. But it doesn't really feel like an act of consumption at the same time. And I was wondering if you have a feeling about the boundary between consumption, which is sometimes seen as like a bad, mindless thing in this digital landscape, and also digestion, which is like, I guess, learning, understanding. I'm also curious about your thoughts, Clement. I think it's a hard question. I can't figure it out, so I'm like pushing it to y'all.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just give a context. It's a project that was a immersive theater project where the viewer themselves played the family. So they received random roles for brother, sister, father, or mother. And when they played the roles, there were a lot of projection and sound, but also on the plate. I never thought about it as a question of digestion and consumption, which is a very interesting framing for that. I think just because I just thinking about it out loud with you, I think like what separates is that the viewer themselves created the situation. They digest what they are saying and how they're engaging, and they had control, but also the lack of control, so the playfulness and spontaneous. So there was a lot of element that like very far from consumption in the way I'm framing consumption. made you eat that dish, or is it you? You know, it's that type of like question. Did I cooked it myself, or is someone cooked it and forced me to eat it? Or so maybe that's kind of like, but I'm thinking out loud as I'm speaking.
Did you do it yourself thing? Like,
Yeah.
invest it yourself. Are you thinking about what you just did and then like redoing in a way?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Thank you. Oh, that's so
Thank
helpful.
you.
I think we have just connected this idea of consumption to, well, consumption maybe in a different way, but Amy had a question that I missed. She's asking to Homan, will your future work continue to explore this concept of performance and consumption? I should really like the analogy of music halls.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I definitely think just working with digital systems implies at least the performance aspect that I was thinking of, or just that digital files are a score that get performed on by various media or different devices. It's a it's kind of a funny way to work when you put your I don't know, I've never made a painting, but I'm imagining with a painting, you put the work out there, the painting doesn't change. It is what it is. You might get different sort of lighting conditions or different context for it. When you make a digital work, it sort of gets played over and over again in sort of different contexts, different screen sizes, different orientations, projector, this, that, or the other. And so there's an interesting sort of revisiting of it. And that's what I was trying to get at with the music score. And I think it's just being sort of open to that, and that's always fun. I think it also, it also just, I mean, it depends what the project is after. In my case, again, I'm sort of, there's specific aspects of the project that I'm interested in including viewers' sort of physical reaction to given sets of images, at least for the postcards from Google Earth. So any future variations that I produce will have that. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's hard. It's not sort of explicit in my work, but it's definitely, yeah, all the work I make, I always think, I never think of the work as finished. I think of the work as a variation. And I can just keep variegating it or keep iterating on it, as long as it's sort of interesting to me and interesting to others. And then when that stops, then the work just dies, and maybe there's an archive, and maybe there's not. I think that's okay too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your answer, Clement.
Well, I think that maybe there's an archive, maybe there's not. It's a great way of like wrapping up this artist talk. Is like perfect, like you rehearsed that, right? Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing thoughts about your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.